Hello and welcome to VoxFem Festival 2023. My name is Ixchel Cuellar, and I am the news director for VoxFem Network and a correspondent for VoxFem Xicanindia. I have the pleasure and honor today to introduce Corazon Collective, featuring Carmen Calatayud, Irene Lara Silva, Joe Reyes Boyden, Angelina Saenz, and Jen Yanez Alanis. Let's get right to it. Angelina Saenz is an award-winning educator and poet whose work focuses on memory, mujeres, and motherhood. She is a UCLA Writing Project Fellow and an alumni of the Vona Voices Workshop for Writers of Color and a Macondo Writers Workshop Fellow. Her poetry has appeared in venues such as Dialogo, Split This Rock, Out of Anonymity, Angel's Flight, Literary West, Every Other, Cockpit Review Pérez, and Acentos Review. Her debut book of poetry, Ixchel, was released in December of 2021 with Flower Song Press. Please welcome Angelina Saenz.
Isla Mujeres. There are big women everywhere here. They dominate. Helmets cover their Leona manes. Overflowing hips pour over scooter seats. Braless breasts snug in tube tops. Their children grab at their sandy legs as their men and women proudly walk arm around their waist. Wide smiles of Yucateca confidence on island sidewalks. Sing Mayan laughter as they gather at Caribbean sunset in front of the taqueria. Window seat at Huckleberry. We surprise me. I wasn't looking for this, neither were you. I keep thinking I have my arms wrapped around what we're doing, and then there's a new feeling, a new moment, another deep conversation. On Sunday, there were tears over steaming coffee and iced lemon scones with cream. I say that I don't want to be vulnerable yet. And you say I should do what I need to do to take care of myself, and that you do want to be with me. The rain we weren't expecting falls, and the cold wind blows down Wilshire. But we're warm and safe for now. This is my last poem. I'm at the stove in my suegra's yellow chipped paint kitchen on Santana Street in Southgate. Comal heat rises and frijolitos bubble. Unmothered mother anxiety brings me here a few days a week to help with crying baby that I am endlessly nursing. I nap in twin-sized bed that smells like history, falling asleep to suegra singing lullabies to Amir, pressing his fat hands together on every syllable. Sunset signals primer impacto's daily exageración. I flip tortillas to their neoliberal Latin American propaganda, quietly cursing their contribution to our continued colonization. But Walter y las Estrellas intro music suspends exhaustion, depression, and cynicism. Apagando todo, I sit on couch, scoop baby into my lap, and wait for my horoscope. Leo, tú eres el rey absoluto del zodiaco, rey de corazones. Donde tú te ubicas, brilla la luz, el amor, la autoridad, el arte, lo refinado y el buen gusto. La máxima en la maternidad, tienes fuerzas espirituales que te protegen. Tú vas a vencer obstáculos y enemigos, y que nadie diga que has sido amado si no has sido amado por ti, Leo. And for that moment, I am everything Walter says I am. Thank you.
Poet and nonfiction writer Carmen Calatayud is the daughter of immigrant war survivors, a Spanish father and an Irish mother. Her book, Press 53 2012, was a runner-up for the Academy of American Poets Walt Whitman Award and an Andres Montoya Poetry Prize finalist. Her work has appeared on or is forthcoming in the Banyan Review, The Manifestation, Oye Drum, Rogue Agent, Tahoma Literary Journal, and various anthologies. She is a Larry Neal Poetry Award winner and a Virginia Center for the Creative Arts Fellow. Carmen has dedicated her time to the immigrant rights movement through poetry and activism. Please welcome Carmen Calatayud.
Flames and Angels, Washington, D.C. There is misery by the busload. Mothers scrounge for bits of bread. Children lose the race with flames. We can't make sense of paper, rock, or scissors, political games. We lose a day each night tending to the problems of the world in our dreams. We can't help but contemplate this sinking earth. We bulge with stories that don't belong to us, but they are ours as much as they are theirs. The tribe that is kicked and the tribe that does the kicking. Far away, the border wall is a waste and the trails overgrown. We pick our own pockets and chew on chunks of grief. So if a cleaning woman gets run down by the bus on 17th, awaken again. She is us and them and all that is. This is your chance to run head on into angels and salvage some wings. There might be a bus ride to peace, a way to put the fire to rest. And I'll read one more poem. A poem I was able to write about 3 years after my mother died from COVID in May 2020. Mother's hips. In the dream, someone keeps repeating that my mother is dead. I keep saying, no, she is frozen because she is of the frozen people who can't recover from never being safe. My mother looks at me as though she isn't here, stares at an invisible constellation. In the dream, I prop her up against the wall, teach her to give birth to the North Node. In the dream, she is slumped over the toilet, ambulance siren closing in, another Valium overdose. In the dream, I tell her my name 4 times. Wait for her to say my name. Please say my name. In the dream, my mother's pelvis murmurs in blue. It tilts towards the hinge of shivering. In the dream, she fades under a male corpse. She doesn't say, I can't speak, but I hear her. In the dream, the cat we named Nina appears. Her onyx fur reflects flying stars. In the dream, Nina is warm to the touch. Mother's eyes, the color of milk.
Joe Reyes Boitel is a poet and playwright, queer mixed Latinx, amateur hand percussionist, and parent, now working on their MFA in creative writing at the University of Texas in Rio Grande Valley, where they also serve as a teaching assistant. Their publications include Michael and Josephine, a novel in verse, and the chapbook Mouth. She Wears Bells. Their hybrid offer was chosen as a finalist for the Guerrilla Opera's 2022 annual virtual festival. Recent or forthcoming publications include Zocalo Public Square, Huizache, Acentos Review, and Oye Drum. Their forthcoming book of poetry, The Matchstick Litanies, will be published by Next Page Press in November of 2023. Please welcome Jo Reyes Boyden.
My body is a bridge of ants, strung haphazardly from one veined hurt to another. Bless this witness moment that lets me stretch my back, trust its impossible configurations, to meet myself on the other side and hold. This is a kind of grace. My body is a mountain range, still, stoic-faced, compacted earth, a quiet all its own, but those unaware cannot, will not see. Mountains are a kind of engine, a timeless process of pushing up from within, a never-ending need to create and recreate themselves far beneath a sludge of fire, inexhaustible and rich, an exaltation of time, a way toward healing, to form new selves as it likes, when it likes. Further still, tectonic plates crashing, lava warming the root of me, and all I give you is this indiscernible face. My last poem is called Break Me. Break my arms. This is the only way I can let go. Plants don't repot themselves, need the directive, the sun circling, the nighttime rain, the fruit that's sown. Break my clavicle, what was once my wing, my bravado, and go. Leave me grounded to a world with only the staples of life, rice and beans to remind the body of its own pool and give. Break my humerus here at this hushed curve, so I never hold on so much that I can't let it all go. Break me, break me. Leave me remembering we should be like plants, following the sun's directive, basking ourselves in its light.
Jen Yanez Alanis is a Chicana mestiza activist, educator, scholar, and poet. She is a PhD fellow in Culture, Literacy, and Language, Department of Bilingual Bicultural Studies at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Her focus study centers on translanguaging poetics as third space. As co-founder of Welcome, a poetry declaration, she brings awareness through equity-driven cultural conversations centered on language, justice, the preservation of language, and language literacy. Her work, Matrilineal Poetics, Toward an Understanding of Corporal Reality and Identity, is featured in Latinas in Hollywood Herstories, a Pushcart nominee. Current and forthcoming publications include the Journal of Latina Critical Feminism, South Dakota Review, Rogue Agent Journal, Mom Egg Review, West Trestle Review, and Cutthroat, Puro Chicanx Writers of the 21st Century Anthology. She is currently at work on an extensive critical biography of Carmen Tafoya, and her first collection of poetry, Surrogate Eater, is currently under editorial review. Please welcome Jen Yanez Alanis.
Sonnet for Hunger. You held it on your tongue, ran outside to dip it in dirt when the rain's damp earth was too much to resist. You dangled hunger between your teeth, tilted your head toward the sun like prayer. The neighbor reported to your mother, said you looked odd, sprawled and gaping wide. So you hid and pressed your lips against your bedroom wall, an angled space behind an open door, subduing hunger. Your mother cried at your feet, wound a rosary around your wrists, pulled you to your knees to pray, when the break in your ribs ached and ached. Running, invasive memory. I know of sin and shame, the obligation of silence in my body, the red ribboning loom of womanhood. Proem, to my suffering. I am beatified by Mother Mary as I run. Holy, obedient girl of intact hymen, I pray for the licentious lust of Mary Magdalene. I want the hunger of a woman abandoned for fucking, the dishonor of breasts, and disgrace of thickening clitoris. I want to suspend the red ribboning loom of my womanhood, of sin, and of my sex. I run miles to reach my bones, my ribs, my altar. What my mother cannot feed me, hunger by proxy. I am wide open, suspended, a pink beast hanging from the sky of an overpriced hotel room. A stranger waits on my bed, begs my descent. He wants to be fed, but I cannot feed him. I fly across the hall to a bedroom that no longer exists. I cry out to my mother. I want to feed her what I cannot eat. Collapsed on the floor, she begs to be fed, but I cannot feed her. My mother stretches her neck. Unhinged, she widens her jaw. I keep from her swallowing all that she denies me. My hips starved and severed breasts. I choke, I release, rope and hoist. My body hangs from the bleed. My body flings across the ceiling. I want to return to my stranger. I need to be fed. Mother, consume me. Thank you.
Irene Lara Silva, we are proud to say, was recently named the 2023 Texas Poet Laureate. She is the author of 4 poetry collections, Furia, Blood Sugar Canto, Wicacali House of Song, and First Poems, 2 chapbooks enduring Azucares and Hibiscus Tacos, and a short story collection, Flesh to Bone, which won the Premio Atzlan. She and poet Dan Vera are also co-editors of Iman Iman, Poets Writing in the Ansalduan Borderlands, a collection of poetry and essays. Irene is the recipient of a 2021 Tasajillo Writers Grant, a 2017 NALAC Fund for the Arts Grant, the final Alfredo Cisneros del Moral Award, and was the fiction finalist for Arrojo's 2013 Gift of Freedom Award. Most recently, Irene was awarded the 2021 Texas Institute of Letters Shrake Award for Best Short Nonfiction. Irene is currently a writer at large for Texas Highways magazine, and she is working on a second collection of short stories titled The Light of Your Body. Please welcome Irene Lara Silva.
My mother would say, mis muertitos, my dead, in the diminutive, claiming all her dead with unfaded, undimmed, unending love and affection. I say when anyone will listen that she taught me how to mourn, as if she knew she would leave me when I was young, as if she knew I would have much to mourn. Or perhaps it was because I was the first child born after her mother died. I don't know the dates. Sometimes I wonder if I floated in tears and not amniotic fluid. She taught me by remembering and remembering her own mother, what her mother loved, how her mother spoke, what her mother believed. And I knew how to mourn my own mother, how it was less pain and more love to remember, to speak all the time of what she loved and what she said and what she taught me. My mother knew no distant way to think of her ancestors, of her beloved dead. I think she would have had compassion for those who are awkward in the face of grief, awkward because grief hasn't yet visited them or because they weren't taught, and they don't know or cannot accept that death is not the opposite of life, only the next part, the next world, the doorway we'll all enter. No one taught me to fear death, and I never learned it on my own. I wonder now because I spend all my days in contemplation, if this is a form of meditation, this remembering the dead who are gone, but also not gone, to mourn and mourn deeply in all directions and time. I cannot make new memories with mis muertitos, but it crosses my mind all the time. They would have loved this. This would have made them laugh, and this would have made them weep. As fiercely as I might laugh or live, what do I call this new way of walking? This sense that every other step is in the next world, not this one. It isn't that they are with me, it's that part of me is already with them. Gracias.
For Angelina, Saenz. Um, so your collection of poems, Edgecliff, mentions 963 Edgecliff Drive, an address. Can you tell us what this place is and why is it central to this particular collection?
It's the building that I grew up in the neighborhood of Silver Lake in LA. And it was, and actually there is a poem about it, but it was 36 apartments around, and then there was this unit in the middle with other apartments. So it was like a huge tenement, but the way that it was designed, it had all these bridges and gardens and staircases, and it was multi-level. It almost represented the complication of the reality that we were living. And when we moved there, originally, all the planters were full of plants. There were pebble gardens. It was so beautiful. And I remember, honestly, almost like when Reagan was elected, they took all the plants out and they took all of the pebble gardens out. And we had a pool in the back, and they filled everything with cement. And so that, for me, the building originally with the plants and the gardens and all of the magical staircases, we would play hide and seek, and everybody would get mad at us because we made so much noise. And we were wild, and we were all latchkey kids. And I witnessed the decline in the manifestation of that building and them filling every single corner with cement, so that suddenly this whole Mediterranean ambiance just became like a block of cement, which really reflected where all of our lives were going, with all of the violence and the unemployment and the homelessness and the poverty.
This next one. So this one is for Jen. Your poem Run, it literally turns the reader into a young Catholic girl in literal motion, in this exquisite combination of desire and pain, of physical development under also shame and religion. And the way that you write about that becoming, that young woman becoming and drawing in the reader those themes, can you tell us about that, about how you drawn your identity, and also just the process of painting? It seems like it's a painted image, and so if you can tell us a little bit about that process.
Ooh, yeah, sure. So, while Surrogate Eater, which is the name of the full collection, is not necessarily autobiographical, there are a lot of elements and themes and experiences that are mine. And so one of my experiences was eating disorder, and running was a way for me to eliminate, just one of many, one of the ways that I would eliminate calories from my body. And so I think that I'm still sort of in process myself, because while there are a lot of things about Catholicism and the whole, element of patriarchy in Catholicism and non-Indigenous ways of being, there are things about it that I'm still trying to understand and reconcile with. I'm not there yet. Because the Catholic religion was a way to confine me, to confine my body, to confine my growth, to confine even puberty. And so there were two different times in my life growing up where puberty was halted. And so what I found, or what I'm finding and what I'm learning and what I'm trying to understand, is that was a way also, not just to control my body, but to control my sex and sexual desire. And the full iteration of Surrogate Eater is about reconciling and transformation. But also, it's interesting because I just had lunch today with somebody, and we talked about the long-lasting damage of running, what it had on my body over time, including the two bottom vertebrae of my back being compressed. And again, it's like I want to be authentic, but I also want to leave enough room for the reader to bring their own experiences to meet the words on the page, and to take what they need to take from it. And if that means, language of forgiveness and compassion and sensuality, I want them to have that experience. It's a really good question. Thank you.
So, Joe, one of the themes in your writing is about being othered, and you draw on your identities as a mixed Latinx queer parent. Automatically, one may think of the challenges of living in this reality, but you also seem to find so much treasure in there for your writing. So tell us a little bit about both the challenges and the gifts inherent there.
Ooh, and in under 30 seconds, right? No, I think that we all come to identity in different ways and different times, right? And we just kind of, in the process of integrating them, can be a really like fraughtful, moment or years even. But it can also bring a lot of joy because there's more of you to love in a sense, right? Because you can appreciate that you're an outlier in most spaces you walk into, but that there's beauty in not being this kind of cookie cutter thing. I do think that there's an urgency to identify. I think that's why I keep it in my bio. I know that it's easy not to sometimes because I think, we can look at ourselves and say, oh yeah, that's family right there. We can do that. But I think it's important to keep it because a lot of dominant culture will ask us not to be so loud about it. And so, and for me, when I'm kind of told to hush it down, or when I feel that, I also feel like I'm being told I'm not allowed to have my joy. So no one should take that. It's interesting, I had to have a conversation because I'm not dating anybody now. I had to have a conversation with my daughter because she's going to be a doctor, and I told her, you remember your mom is queer, right? And she's like, yes, mom. But there is this kind of, because I have so many mixtures, they come together in unique ways. And I think there's an opportunity to really kind of teach others. It also has made me more open to work in community, I think, and that sometimes when you don't have to do that questioning, it's easy to then just say, here's the way it is. But it's been nice to kind of take a moment and work a little more slowly and work quietly to kind of figure out, what's in the room, who's in the room, what needs to be addressed, what can be loved on, or what needs that love. Thank you for asking.
Irene, congratulations first on being named Texas Poet Laureate for 2023. We were overjoyed to hear that.
Gracias.
Just really overjoyed. So we want to make sure. So these recent years have been marked by so much loss. There's a piece of a poem, what you read today as well, but there's a piece of a poem you wrote after your brother's death, the brother that you cared for so many years, that speaks to that feeling in the most beautiful way. It is, forgive me for reading your words, it'll be written. Here in my chest is where I bring all the flowers, where I leave all the brightly ribboned memories, all the silver medallitas of all the things that meant so much to us both, where I carry all his favorite things and where I put all the things he would have loved and he will never see or know or taste. Here is where I will carry all the balloons, lighter than air and heavier than grief. I am the descanso. And this, I think that really is in very significant words for so many, especially now. So my question is, what do you want to do? What do you want to see? What do you want to experience next in this future where we carry our loved ones with us?
I think I'm going to kind of approach your question from the side. What I'm seeing already, and I learned after my first book. I learned after the first book that you think you write because you want to express yourself. You think you write because you want to share what you're feeling. You think you write because you want the beauty of publication or of a book. But those aren't actually the reasons you write and publish and put the work out there. After the first book, what completely surprised me, and the first book was a lot about, it was after the loss of my mother, and it was about the shock and the craziness of being in my 30s and how life was different from what I thought it would be. But what I learned in that time was that the poetry invited people to join in on conversations and discussions that they otherwise wouldn't. That sometimes with a poem, you can introduce difficult things like identity, grief, loss, mortality, illness, disconnection, isolation, depression, everything. One of the beautiful things that poetry can do is that it can make people not feel alone. And it's interesting that I didn't learn that till after the first book, because when I think back to all the poetry I loved, it was all the poetry that made me not feel alone. It was all the poetry that made me feel like I could keep on going. I could keep on. I tell people, if I had to only live with one poem for the rest of my life, I would take Audre Lorde's Litany of Survival with me. That's a poem I would take, because it's seen me through the last 30 years. So I would assume it could see me through the rest of my life. But what I'm finding with the new poems, which won't even be out in the book until January, is that already people that hear me read from these poems that I wrote after my brother passed, and they're about his passing and about loss and about grief and about mortality and about how you figure out how to live with grief. What I found is already it's inviting people in the audience to come up to me and to feel that it's okay to come up to me with tears streaming down their face and to tell me that they understand and that they have also felt it and that they had not before heard it or been invited to cry with someone. And that's, I think, a powerful thing, because just all of us in life, we lose someone, but especially, I think because of the pandemic and how heavy the losses have been, there's very few people now that aren't touched by the loss of someone. Or, we are, for people that haven't faced those losses or who are very young, part of them has to know, that's part of what they're going to experience in life. And so how do you make yourself strong enough to survive that? And how do you have faith that you will survive it if you don't see and hear people who have survived it?
Yes. Carmen, this is a question for you. Your poetry
heart-wrenching and intense, and you walk into that reality of the poem, and then you come out and paint another reality with colors bursting and an incredible imagery that comes to life. And my question is to be able to inhabit all those places, to come in and out of those places. What does your upbringing have to do with it, and what does it mean to be someone who was raised by people fleeing wars and seeing the horrors of war? How do you take all of that in your ins and outs of your poetry?
It's a great question. I mean, even as you ask the question, I recognize that it's always been a lot to hold. And yet I'm so used to it that I don't know anything else. You know, I think that I had to learn along the way, you know, and put the pieces together of my parents' story, you know, because the wars and what they both experienced, you know, during their childhood were not things that they talked about openly. It wasn't until I was 16 years old and had to write a history paper and chose the topic of the Spanish Civil War that I actually sat down with my father in the living room and interviewed him and had a cassette tape recorder and recorded the conversation, and, you know, learned some of the lines that are in the poem that is for him. In the book, you know, we played soccer around the bodies, you know, and so these images that he described to me, you know, stayed with me. And over the years, his stories and then my mother's stories about seeing kids who couldn't make it to the bomb shelter in London during World War II, you know, those things stayed with me, but they also helped me make sense of so much of their pain and their own trauma and what they carried. And, you know, I have a poem that's not in the book, but that was published a couple of years ago where I talk about, you know, they survived war, but, you know, they created a war, their own war inside our house. And, you know, but I think it just takes a long time to process all of these things and understand, you know, what's happened to your ancestors, what's happened to your parents. And I guess, you know, I feel like it's my obligation to speak out about war and to speak for peace, to speak out about immigration, and speak out about what's happening in this country and how people are treated. You know, because people die over these things. And I don't feel like I have the luxury to not speak out about those things. I know that it's in my body and it's in my nervous system. And I say that as a trauma therapist too. And I don't think it's any accident that I ended up doing that kind of work. But thank you so much for the question.
How and who decided to put all of you spectacular folks together in the Corazon Collective?
Spontaneous combustion. So there is also the Corazon Collective website that Joe put together. So corazoncollective.org has basically all of our bios, infos, everything, and I think all our links also. But basically what's happening next is that Mouthfeel Press will be publishing a chapbook with all of our work in it. Right now it's tentatively titled Color Mi Corazon, coming out in February. And we are we're all looking at books coming out. Jen's chapbook, Surrogate Eater, just came out last week. Everybody's working on Joe's book is coming out in, I believe, October. The Matchstick Litanies,
November.
in November. And so other books will be coming up soon. And we are already booking. We're planning our next tour for fall of 2024 in Texas. So anybody that's interested in Texas, and y'all are interested in feeding us and hosting us and, you know, all the good stuff, they can contact us. But yeah, so we have a lot to look forward to.
Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Thank
Good
y'all
night.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
To learn more about the Corazon Collective or to book them for performances or workshops, go to corazoncollective.org. VoxFem Network features women artists and changemakers from every nation and occupied territory on Earth. For more info, visit voxfem.org and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Ixchel, and this is VoxFem Xicanindia on the VoxFem Network.